Hi there. In our body, we've got a particular system known as the endocrine system. This system is made up of endocrine glands. In this video, our main focus are the thyroid glands, which are found in the neck region. This is Z Online School. In this video, you and I are going to be looking at a complete guide to the thyroid glands. We're going to do this in a systematic way, and mainly you're going to know three things: what the thyroid glands are, the names and function of the thyroid hormones, and the thyroid gland disorders. At the end of this video, we've got bonus tips, so make sure you watch this video till the end to get the maximum value out of it. Let's begin with talking about the definition of the thyroid glands. The thyroid glands are simply defined by talking about their location. Like I said in other videos about other endocrine glands, whenever we're defining endocrine glands, we just simply talk about what they do and where they are located. So like you can see here, this is the definition of the thyroid glands. The Adam's apple is a thyroid cartilage of the larynx. When you talk about a cartilage, we're talking about a firm, flexible tissue. Let me give you examples for you to understand. If you touch your ear right now, you are going to feel some bony structure that is flexible. Even if you try to twist your ear, you're not going to find it breaking. That's what we call cartilage. Now, we have this cartilage in our neck. Usually men have it and you're able to see it. It's that protrusion in the neck. That's the Adam's apple. The larynx is a hollow muscular structure. It's hollow because it's a passage for air to the lungs, and it's muscular because it has vocal cords. Now, let's look at some picture and just visualize what we have just talked about. In this picture, we've been shown the location of the thyroid glands and their structure. In this diagram, we've also been shown the left part and the right part of the thyroid glands. Simply put, the thyroid gland is made up of two glands, the left thyroid gland and the right thyroid gland. When giving names to parts of the body or telling which side it is, we usually swap them. Why? Because when we are looking at the body like this, it's like you're standing behind the screen and then we're giving the parts according to how they are situated. If you imagine what I've just said, you agree with me that this part of the body is the left part and this right part is the right part of this person's body. If you've done anything referring to the heart, obviously you've done this simple imagination before. Now, let's talk about the thyroid hormones. What are thyroid hormones? Well, thyroid hormones are just simply the hormones produced by the thyroid glands. There are mainly three hormones that are secreted by the thyroid glands. These three hormones are namely thyroxine, which we will talk about mainly in this video, triiodothyronine, and calcitonin. However, two of them are the hormones that are regarded to be very directly secreted by the thyroid glands. Calcitonin is debatable. It's not produced by the thyroid glands, but is produced by the parathyroid glands. Some structures found on the thyroid glands. Maybe later in other videos we'll talk about the parathyroid gland, but for now we're talking about the thyroid gland and thyroxine. Thyroxine affects mainly three useful target organs, ones that you're always supposed to remember: the cells, adipose tissue, and the nerves. If you can remember these three target organs, at least you can remember three functions of the thyroid gland. I'm sure you know what the cells are. Adipose tissue is just tissue where fat is stored, in case you didn't know. The nerves are a specialized type of cells. Their job is to transmit impulses. We'll talk about more of the nerves in a video about the nervous system. Let's begin with talking about the effect of thyroxine in the cells. Before I talk about the effect of thyroxine in the cells, it's very important to remember that the hormones are going to be traveling in this simple fashion. The hormone is secreted by a gland, diffuses in the blood circulatory system, then it gets lodged on a receptor. When it gets lodged on a receptor, the target organ gets affected. Right from the start, obviously, you might start doubting, well, are the cells an organ? Well, what I might just help you to do is think with me downward the hierarchy in which the cells get organized, or simply we go down in the chain of cellular organization. The first thing are cells, then cells making tissue, tissue making an organ. So if a certain hormone is destined for an organ, in that organ we're going to have tissue, and in that tissue we're going to have cells. So every hormone is going to affect the cells of a particular organ. Now, what is interesting about thyroxine is that it affects many body cells, and in the cells, when there's a secretion of thyroxine, what you're going to find is that there will be increased consumption of adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate is well known to be an energy molecule, or simply a substance that is used to provide energy. One thing you should always remember is that ATP is directly linked with active transport. So what happens in the cells is that some molecules that get into the cell and out of the cell need ATP, or simply are going to travel through active transport. And hence, because of this traveling of these molecules in and out, there will be a lot of consumption of ATP. And hence what happens is that the levels of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, are going to drop. And we know that whenever there's something that changes in our body will automatically try to bring back everything in the body back to normal. Hence, the body increases metabolic reactions to produce more ATP. And as you may have seen it already, effects of thyroxine in the cells is that it increases the rate of metabolic reactions. An example of metabolic reaction that really helps the production of ATP is cellular respiration. This cellular respiration happens in the mitochondria. As they are known, they are the powerhouse of the cell. They supply energy. So cellular respiration will take place there, and we're going to have carbon dioxide, water, ATP, and heat being produced. All these products that are produced from cellular respiration can be linked to functions of the thyroxine hormone. And later in this video, we'll get to talk about more of that. Next, we have the adipose tissue. Like we said, this is a storage place of fats. So what happens when the secretion of thyroxine is that this thyroxine is going to stimulate the splitting of fatty acids and glycerol. Basically, when you talk about fats, we are referring to lipids, and when you talk about oils, we are referring to lipids. They are almost one and the same thing. The difference between fats and oils is just their state in which they are. So this hormone thyroxine causes the splitting of lipids. We know that 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerol make up the lipids. Therefore, when thyroxine reaches the adipose tissue, it causes the breaking down of these fats, as you can say if you want, or the lipids to be safer. And we have these parts that make up the fats. What's interesting is that the fatty acids and glycerol will be later made into glucose by the liver. Mainly what is used to make glucose is the glycerol. The fatty acids are not so directly linked to the making of glucose by the liver. The glycerol is the main part that will be used to make glucose by the liver. Now, what you understand by this simple procedure is that there will be increased breakdown of fats when we have thyroxine in our blood circulation. The next thing is we're talking about the effect of thyroxine for the nerve cells. We know the nerve cells conduct these nerve impulses. So when we have secretion of thyroxine, what happens is the nerves are developed. Very simple, as you can see, the nerves are developed. And when we talk about the development of nerves, we're talking about the parts of the nerves like the dendrites, which are these parts here, the myelin sheath, which are these yellowish parts, and the synapses, which are the ends of the nerve. Under the nervous system, we're going to talk about more detailed information about each of these parts, but what you just need to know is that when these parts of the nerve are developed, it will create a better transmission, and later we're going to see how that affects the body. So the 3 things we've talked about is that thyroxine is going to increase metabolic rate, it's going to cause fat breakdown, and it's going to increase nerve development. I'm going to give you some more functions that can enable you to give more than 3 functions of thyroid hormones, or more than 3 functions of the thyroid glands. Other functions you might think of are the stimulation of bone growth and the controlling of heart rate. These are also very important to remember. Now, let's look at the thyroid gland disorders. When you talk about a disorder, what do we mean? A disorder, to be basic, is just a disruption in how something works. Okay? A disorder is the disruption of how something functions or works. So when there's a disorder, our thyroid gland won't be able to do those functions in a good way. The first disorder we can see here is hyperthyroidism. Thyroidism shouldn't confuse you, it's just pointing to the thyroid gland. So the main thing you're supposed to use to denote this disorder is the hyper. When we say hyper in biology, we usually mean high. So the thyroid glands are performing too much of their function that it brings a problem to the body. So it's a disorder in the thyroid glands that causes oversecretion of the thyroid hormones. It's very important to know that hyperactivity is directly linked to hyperthyroidism, or simply hyperactivity is directly related to the oversecretion of thyroid hormones. Now, this hyperthyroidism has got some symptoms that you should always remember. The first is increased basal metabolic rate. Basal metabolic rate is just your metabolic rate when you are not very active. Maybe you are seated, sleeping, and things like that. The next is weight loss. Somebody who has hyperactivity might experience this weight loss. Somebody who has hyperthyroidism, to be general, will experience weight loss. The third is nervousness, and the fourth is going to be irritability. We're going to talk about these functions even more later in the video. What you just need to do is find a piece of paper where you can write these functions and see how they differ from hypothyroidism. They are kind of opposite disorders. What hypothyroidism does, hyperthyroidism does the opposite. So let's talk about hypothyroidism now. What is hypothyroidism? Hypothyroidism, like you may guess, is caused by the undersecretion of thyroid hormone. The conditions that you should always remember is myxedemia and cretinism. These two conditions might even be included in your exams. You might be asked questions about them. It's rare that you find your disorders being separated as hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. Mostly, you'll be just given the conditions. You talk about hyperactivity, myxedemia, and cretinism. But I decided you need to know the general division in which these disorders can fall. They are mainly caused by two situations: oversecretion or undersecretion. Now, right here, as we're talking about hypothyroidism, we need to understand more about these conditions, myxedemia and cretinism. Obviously, we know they are both conditions where there will be low levels of thyroid hormones, but it's very important to note that myxedemia will be common in adults. It's rare that myxedemia will occur in very little children or babies. Cretinism is when we have hypothyroidism as a child. The causes of this myxedemia is obviously iodine deficiency. When we talk about iodine deficiency, we're talking about a person's diet lacking iodine. Thyroxine is very dependent on iodine. So if there's no iodine in the body, the thyroid glands cannot make thyroxine. Cretinism, on the other hand, is a type of hypothyroidism that occurs in little children. Obviously, this will be due to a result mostly because of iodine deficiency by an expecting mother. If a mother who's expecting does not get enough iodine, it might affect the baby who's unborn. And cretinism has very outstanding symptoms. People suffering from cretinism or babies suffering from cretinism will have low physical, sexual, and mental development. They will be mentally retarded and things like that. Generally, hypothyroidism has the following symptoms. The first one is low BMR. The other one is weight gain, decreased heart rate, and we have cold intolerance. When you talk about cold intolerance, we're talking about someone failing to withstand cold. When you say intolerant, it's the failure to withstand something. With that said and done, you have reached the bonus tip section. We're going to share some tips that are very helpful to understand everything we've talked about in this video. The first thing is a common related condition to the thyroid glands, which is the goiter. The goiter is usually a result of the lack of iodine. In this picture, you've been showed what a goiter looks like. It's simply the swelling of the thyroid glands. You can see it's a very bad situation to be in. Usually this is because of lack of iodine in the diet. So what happens is the person will be trying to make thyroxine via the thyroid glands, but because of lack of iodine, the body cannot make thyroxine. Therefore, the thyroid glands will keep being stressed. Why? Because the pituitary gland keeps secreting this thyroid stimulating hormone, but the thyroid glands cannot make thyroxine because there's no iodine. Hence, our body will start getting these thyroid glands swelled up. The next tip is about the relationship between the functions and the disorders. I'm sure you remember a disorder had symptoms, and I'm sure you can remember some of these functions. I've just selected 4 because after you know the relationship, you will be able to relate each and every function we looked at. As you can see, we've got metabolic rate, fat breakdown, nerve development, and heart rate for the respective organs. If you remember, thyroxine increased the metabolic rate, it increased the fat breakdown, and it increased nerve development. It also increased the heart rate. So what you're supposed to understand here is that these functions will be directly linked to these 2 disorders, hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. One thing you should always remember is that hypo is low and hyper is high. So when we have hypothyroidism, what that means is all these functions will be lowered. There will be a very low metabolic rate, a very low fat breakdown, a very low nerve development, very low heart rate. Now think about it. If someone has a low metabolic rate, what will happen? They won't have a lot of energy and they won't have a lot of heat. Why? Because the glucose provides the ATP in the cells. So when we don't have enough metabolic reactions, we're not going to have enough ATP and enough heat. That's why we said someone suffering from hypothyroidism will be cold intolerant, or they won't be able to withstand the cold because their body doesn't have enough metabolic reactions that are occurring for the heat to be sufficient. Now, when you talk about fat breakdown, think about it. If someone is not breaking down the fat, you expect that they will gain weight, just like we looked at one of the symptoms. When you talk about nerve development, they will be mentally retarded because of the low development of nerves, because nerves are very important for the impulses to travel nice and smoothly. The heart rate will also be low. Next, we do the same for hyperthyroidism. If there's too much thyroxine being secreted, someone has a condition called hyperthyroidism, and therefore their metabolic rate will be too high, and therefore ATP will be too much and the heat will be too much. Therefore, someone suffering from hypothyroidism will experience very high temperatures, they'll sweat a lot, they are going to have a lot of energy, and that's why we refer to hyperactivity as one of the conditions. They are going to be losing a lot of weight because, if you can remember, there will be high fat breakdown, and therefore they are going to lose a lot of weight. Why? Because if you remember, when you looked at the adipose tissue, as you can see here, there's a picture to help you remember. The adipose tissue is where the fat breakdown takes place because of thyroxine. The nerve development will be very high, and that's why you will find they will be very nervous and they will be irritable because all their nerves are so well connected and all the nerve impulses are traveling super good, and therefore their nervous system will be very active. Heart rate, as you can expect, will also be high, and the bone growth will also be high. Lastly, but not the least, we are going to talk about the Adam's apple. Obviously, you might have heard the Adam's apple for the first time and wondered why it was called the Adam's apple. Well, I think it all started when people read that Adam ate the forbidden fruit. And I think the early biologists believed that that part of the fruit got lodged into Adam's throat. Obviously, that was before they knew that Adam's apple is thyroid cartilage of the larynx. When they knew that, this notion was done away with. But the Adam's apple is called that because of this simple explanation. Thanks for watching this video till the end. Make sure you watch other videos about more endocrine glands so that you can get to know the endocrine system better. It's also advisable you check the links in the description and the time code for you to be able to skip to other parts of the video that we would like to watch. Don't forget to leave comments in the comment section so that there can be some interaction.